The billionaire CEO adjusted her worn cap and stepped through the revolving doors of her own luxury hotel. Nobody recognized Victoria Sterling. Not the bellhops. Not the front desk staff. Not even the assistant manager, who was supposed to be maintaining the standards she had built her empire upon. She had come here undercover for a specific reason, but nothing could have prepared her for what she discovered next. The sound of quiet weeping coming from the service corridor behind the grand lobby. Through the partially open door, a crumpled uniform jacket lay on the floor beside a mop bucket. The name embroidered on the pocket read, Elena Rodriguez, housekeeping. The crying wasn't just tears of frustration. It was the sound of someone whose entire world was crumbling. Victoria felt her chest tighten. 4 months ago, corporate headquarters had received outstanding reports about this Boston location. Exceptional guest satisfaction ratings. Perfect employee retention scores. 0 incidents reported. But the woman sobbing in that narrow corridor told a completely different story. As she stood frozen in the opulent hallway with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors, one horrifying question burned through her mind. If this was happening in her own hotel chain, under her own leadership, what other suffering had she been blind to? The truth she was about to uncover would be more devastating than anything she had imagined. And it would force her to confront everything she thought she knew about building a business empire, about the price of ambition, and the real cost of turning a blind eye to those who made her success possible. What started as a routine quality check was about to become the most transformative week of her life. Stay with me, because what happens next will fundamentally change how you understand the human cost of luxury hospitality. Victoria knocked softly on the service door. "Excuse me. Is everything all right?" The crying stopped immediately. She heard movement, then the sound of someone trying desperately to pull themselves together. "I'm okay. I'll be right out. Please don't report me." But the tremor in her voice revealed everything. This wasn't okay. This was a woman barely holding on. When Elena Rodriguez finally emerged, Victoria saw a small woman in her mid-30s. Her housekeeping uniform was stained and damp, her eyes swollen from crying. She quickly bent to retrieve her jacket, but her hands were shaking so violently she dropped it twice. "I apologize," she whispered in accented English, refusing to meet Victoria's eyes. "I should not be here. I need to return to my rooms." Victoria studied her carefully. Elena's hands were red and chapped from constant exposure to industrial cleaning chemicals. Deep exhaustion etched lines around her eyes, the kind that comes from working multiple shifts and surviving on too little sleep. But it was something else that caught Victoria's attention. The way Elena flinched when voices echoed from the main corridor. "You don't seem all right," Victoria said gently. "I'm Veronica. By the way, started in laundry services this week." Elena glanced up briefly, as if trying to determine whether this stranger posed a threat or could be trusted. After a long moment, her shoulders slumped with defeat. "Everything is falling apart," she admitted. "My son Diego needs treatment for his asthma. It is getting worse every month, and I cannot afford the medications anymore." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Forgive me. You do not need my problems." "How long have you been working here?" Victoria asked. "Almost 4 years. I have never missed a shift. Never been late. But recently," she gestured toward a schedule board mounted on the corridor wall. Victoria followed her gaze and felt her blood run cold. The schedule was chaos. Crossed out assignments, reduced shifts, handwritten changes in different colors of ink. Elena's name appeared inconsistently. Sometimes 30 hours one week, 40 the next. Then suddenly dropped to 18. No pattern. No way to plan childcare or budget for necessities. They keep reducing my hours, Elena explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Whitmore says it is new efficiency protocols from corporate. But I do not understand. The hotel is always fully booked. We are always running between rooms. Victoria's jaw tightened. She knew the corporate policies on scheduling. What she was seeing contradicted everything in the employee handbook. Full-time housekeeping staff were guaranteed consistent hours and benefits. This looked like systematic manipulation. And when I asked about the health insurance that was supposed to begin after my probation period, Elena's voice cracked. She told me I was not eligible because my schedule classification had changed to variable part-time. The pieces were starting to form a picture that made Victoria's stomach turn. But she forced herself to remain calm, to maintain her cover. That doesn't sound right, she said carefully. Elena looked around nervously, then moved closer. There are others, too. Carmen in laundry, James at the front desk, Miguel in maintenance. We all have the same problems. But Mrs. Whitmore says if we complain, there are dozens of people waiting to take our positions. A chill ran through Victoria. Diane Whitmore. She remembered the name from the management files. General manager. Stellar performance reviews. No complaints on record. At least none that had reached corporate headquarters in Manhattan. Listen, Veronica. Elena continued, lowering her voice further. I need this position. My son. He is only 6 years old and without his medication during the winter. She couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria watched as Elena pinned her name tag back onto her uniform with trembling fingers. That small embroidered patch represented everything to her. Her son's health care. Their rent in an expensive city. Their survival. And someone was weaponizing that desperation. I should go, Elena said, glancing toward the guest corridors. My shift ends at midnight, but I must return at 5 in the morning to prepare rooms before the breakfast rush. Mrs. Whitmore scheduled me for a split shift, but somehow the system only shows 9 hours of pay instead of 12. As she hurried away, Victoria noticed her slight limp, probably from years of pushing heavy housekeeping carts on hard floors without proper footwear. The company policy clearly stated that employees were entitled to appropriate equipment, including supportive shoes and ergonomic carts. Another standard that apparently wasn't being enforced. Victoria stood alone in that service corridor, staring at the chaotic schedule board. Each canceled shift represented a family struggling to survive in one of America's most expensive cities. Each arbitrary hour cut meant someone choosing between paying rent and buying food. She had built sterling hotels on the foundation that exceptional service came from exceptional treatment of employees. But somewhere in the distance between boardroom policies and the reality of housekeeping corridors, that foundation was being systematically dismantled. The question was, how widespread was this corruption, and how many people were suffering while she celebrated record profits in her penthouse office? Completely oblivious to their pain, Victoria didn't have to wait long to see the system in operation. The next morning, she reported for her cover job in the laundry facility. She watched from the industrial washers as Elena clocked in for her 5 a.m. shift. She moved stiffly, clearly in pain. But her expression was determined. Whatever struggles she faced at home, she was here, ready to work. At 5:43 a.m., Diane Whitmore swept through the service areas. Diane was exactly what Victoria had suspected from her personnel file. Early 40s. Expensively highlighted hair pulled into a severe bun. Designer glasses that cost more than Elena, probably made in a week. And the kind of cold authority that came from wielding power without accountability. She wore her management badge like armor. and her eyes immediately locked onto Elena, organizing her housekeeping cart near the service elevator. Rodriguez. Diane's voice cut through the quiet morning like a blade. Elena's shoulders tensed, but she continued, methodically stacking towels. Rodriguez. I'm speaking to you. She finally looked up, her face carefully neutral. Yes. Mrs. Whitmore. Your room completion time yesterday was unacceptable. 14 minutes per room, when the standard is 12. What exactly were you doing? Victoria watched Elena's hands still on the towels. 14 minutes per room in a luxury hotel was actually quite fast, especially given the Sterling's reputation for impeccable attention to detail. But Elena simply nodded. I will work faster. You certainly will. And next time, perhaps try focusing on your job instead of whatever personal drama you bring to work. Diane's voice dripped with disdain. Actually, I need to see you in my office immediately. Victoria felt her fingernails die into her palms. She forced herself to stay at her station, to continue folding linens, to keep observing. If she intervened now, she would compromise her investigation before understanding the full scope of the abuse. In Diane's office, Elena stood while Diane remained seated behind her mahogany desk. A deliberate power dynamic that made Victoria's blood boil. Through the glass wall, she could see Elena's posture becoming smaller with each word Diane spoke. Carmen Vasquez, the laundry supervisor Elena had mentioned, joined Victoria at the folding station and sighed heavily. Poor Elena, Carmen murmured in Spanish, shaking her head. 4th time this week she has been summoned there. What is she saying to her? Victoria asked in Spanish, letting her Boston accent soften into something closer to Carmen's Dominican inflections. The same things she says to all of us. Carmen's voice was bitter. That we should be grateful for employment. That people like us. She paused, weighing her words. That people like us, immigrants, single mothers, people without papers or options, should accept whatever conditions we are given. People like us. You understand? Mrs. Whitmore knows exactly who she can abuse. Through the glass wall, Victoria watched Diane lean back in her leather chair, her body language radiating casual cruelty. Elena stood motionless, her hands clasped in front of her like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. Then Diane did something that made Victoria's vision narrow with rage. She pulled out Elena's timesheet and began making marks with a red pen directly in front of her. She is cutting her hours again, Carmen whispered, probably claiming Elena took unauthorized breaks or worked too slowly. Last month, she docked James 3 hours for being in the bathroom too long. He has diabetes. Victoria reached for her phone, finding the voice recording app. Whatever was happening in that office, she needed documentation. Through the thin walls, Diane's voice carried clearly. I have told you before. Rodriguez, if you cannot handle the workload without becoming emotional, perhaps this position is not suitable for you. There are countless people who would be grateful for your job. Please. Mrs. Whitmore. Elena's voice was almost inaudible. I just need reliable hours. My son needs his medications. Your personal problems are not my concern. What concerns me is that you have been speaking to other employees about scheduling policies. That sounds like troublemaking to me. Victoria's thumb pressed record. I was not making trouble. I was only trying to understand. Just what? Trying to organize some kind of staff complaint? Because that would be very unfortunate for your continued employment here. The threat was unmistakable. Elena fell silent. Now, I am reducing you to 15 hours next week. Perhaps that will help you concentrate on work instead of spreading dissatisfaction. And Rodriguez, If I hear that you have been discussing policies or wages with anyone else, we will need to have a conversation about whether you belong at Sterling Hotels at all. Victoria watched Elena nod silently, her dignity being systematically stripped away. When she finally emerged from the office, her face was ashen but controlled. She walked past the laundry facility without looking in, her head held high despite everything. But Victoria had seen enough. The phone in her pocket contained Diane's own words, clear evidence of the systematic abuse happening under the Sterling Hotel's brand. As Diane returned to her desk, checking her manicure casually like she hadn't just devastated someone's livelihood, Victoria felt something crystallize inside her. This wasn't just about Elena anymore. This was about every vulnerable employee who had been ground down by people like Diane Whitmore. The time for passive observation was ending. Now it was time to see exactly how deep this corruption ran. Victoria left the hotel that evening with her mind racing. She drove her rented economy car. Nothing that would attract attention. Back to the modest apartment she had rented under her cover identity. In the small living room, surrounded by employee files and financial reports, she began mapping out her next moves. The recording on her phone played back Diane's threats. Each word was evidence of systematic abuse. But Victoria knew this was merely the surface. If Diane felt comfortable enough to openly intimidate employees, what was she doing when she believed no one was watching? Victoria opened her laptop and accessed the hotel's employment database through her secure corporate login. What she discovered made her hands shake with fury. Over the past 10 months, the Boston Sterling had experienced an 82% turnover rate among hourly staff. The official reasons listed for most departures were voluntary resignation or failure to meet performance standards. But Victoria could read the truth beneath the corporate language. People didn't voluntarily leave positions at a prestigious hotel in an expensive city. They were being forced out. She cross-referenced the departure dates with Diane's performance bonuses. The correlation was disturbing. Each quarter that saw increased staff turnover, Diane received higher efficiency bonuses. Her labor costs were down 31%. Her operational metrics were exemplary. Zero formal complaints filed with human resources. On paper, Diane Whitmore was an exceptional general manager. But Victoria was beginning to understand the mechanism. Keep employees desperate and terrified. Prevent them from working enough hours to qualify for benefits. Ensure that anyone who might complain simply vanished from the payroll. It was brilliantly cruel. Victoria opened a new document and began constructing her deeper cover story. Veronica Martinez, former hotel worker from Miami, recently moved to Boston, struggling to rebuild her life after a divorce. No children to support, just grateful for any opportunity. The kind of employee Diane would view as perfectly exploitable. She rehearsed the persona in the bathroom mirror, adjusting her posture, her speech patterns, even her gait. Victoria had grown up in working-class neighborhoods in Chicago before her hotels became a global empire. She knew how to blend in. The key was remembering rather than performing. The next morning, Victoria returned to the hotel in her thrift store work clothes. She approached Diane's office with the perfect combination of desperation and eagerness. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whitmore. I heard there might be openings in housekeeping. I am willing to work any shift, any hours you need." Diane looked up from her computer, her eyes immediately evaluating this new potential victim. Victoria could practically see the assessments running through the woman's mind. Another desperate worker to control. Experience? Housekeeping mostly. Victoria replied in her carefully crafted accent. Hotels in Miami. But that economy collapsed. I need steady work. I am not particular about the position. Cleaning. Laundry. Whatever is available. You have references? Victoria handed over a meticulously prepared resume, complete with fake references she had arranged through trusted contacts. These people will vouch for me. I show up on time. I work hard. I do not create problems. Diane's smile was predatory. I appreciate that attitude. Tell you what, Veronica, I can start you in housekeeping. Morning shift. $13 an hour. You will be working with Elena Rodriguez. But do not let her fill your head with complaints. She has a tendency toward dramatics. The casual cruelty in Diane's voice made Victoria want to reach across the desk. But she forced herself to nod eagerly. That sounds perfect. Ma'am, when do I begin? Tomorrow morning. 5 a.m. Sharp. And Veronica. Diane leaned forward. I reward loyalty and discretion. Employees who understand how things operate here do very well. Employees who cause difficulties do not last long. Victoria nodded as if she understood perfectly. And she did. Just not in the way Diane intended. The following morning, Victoria changed into her uniform in the staff locker room, transforming herself completely into Veronica Martinez. She pinned her temporary name tag to her uniform. The plastic rectangle, feeling strange after years of designer business suits and executive boardrooms. When Elena arrived for the morning shift, she looked surprised to see her. You returned, she said quietly. I told you I needed the work, Victoria replied. I suppose we are partners now. Elena studied her face, perhaps sensing something unusual about this new employee, but unable to identify what it was. Stay close to me today, she said finally. I will teach you our procedures. And, Veronica, everything I mentioned about being careful around Mrs. Whitmore. That is even more important when you are new. That is when she watches most carefully. As they began their rounds through the luxury suites, Victoria felt the weight of what she was about to experience. Somewhere in the next 8 hours, she would learn the full extent of Diane Whitmore's operation. She was no longer just documenting the problem. She was about to live it. The hotel revealed its true nature once Victoria entered the world of housekeeping. What had seemed like an elegant luxury property from the guest perspective showed its exploitation clearly from the service corridors. Victoria followed Elena through her routine, learning the exhausting choreography of cleaning 15 rooms per shift. But within the first 2 hours, she began noticing details that made her fury build. Elena, why are you using the same cleaning solution for the bathrooms and the drinking glasses? Victoria asked, watching her rinse a cloth in a bucket that reeked of harsh chemicals. Elena glanced around nervously before answering. Mrs. Whitmore reduced the supplies budget. She says we are wasteful. She held up a nearly empty bottle of glass cleaner. This must last the entire week for all the housekeeping staff. Victoria knew the corporate allocation for cleaning supplies. This location should have 5 times what she was seeing. At 7:15 a.m., Diane made her first inspection rounds. She moved through the guest corridors like a shark, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floors. When she found Elena restocking minibar items in a deluxe suite, her voice sliced through the quiet. Rodriguez, you are moving inefficiently. At this pace, you will never complete your assignments on time. I am working as quickly as I can. Mrs. Whitmore, clearly not quickly enough. I am deducting 20 minutes from your timesheet for poor time management. Victoria watched from the adjacent suite as Diane pulled out her phone and made a note. 20 minutes. Nearly $5 stolen right in front of her eyes. But it became worse. At 9:30 a.m., Diane returned with her tablet. Rodriguez, Martinez, I need to speak with you both. They gathered in an empty guest room as Diane consulted her screen. Corporate has been asking questions about our labor expenses. Starting next week, we are implementing new efficiency standards. She smiled as if announcing good news. Instead of 2 housekeepers per floor, we are moving to 1. Each of you will be responsible for your own floor of 20 rooms. Elena's face went pale. Mrs. Whitmore. That is 40 rooms between us. One person cannot clean 20 luxury suites in an 8-hour shift. One person can and will. Elena, since you have more experience. You will take the premium suites on the 5th floor. Veronica, you will handle the 4th floor standard rooms. If you cannot manage the workload, I can always find replacements who can. After Diane left, Elena leaned against the wall. Her breathing shallow. I cannot clean 20 suites alone, she whispered. The premium suites take at least 25 minutes each. That is 8 hours just for cleaning, not including restocking or preparing turn-down service. And if you complain, you lose everything. Victoria finished. Elena nodded, tears forming. Diego's medications cost $300 every month. Without this job, without the insurance I was promised. That was when Victoria noticed something that made her investigative instincts sharpen. Diane had left her office door propped open. And through the gap, Victoria could see her at her computer, typing with focused intensity. Elena, can you finish this floor alone? I need to check something. Elena looked worried. Be very careful. Veronica, if she catches you near her office. Victoria moved silently down the service corridor. Through the gap in the door, she could see Diane's computer screen clearly. What she saw made her hands tremble with rage. Diane was logged into the employee scheduling system, methodically reducing hours for multiple staff members. But she wasn't simply cutting time. She was reassigning those hours to a phantom employee named D. Whitmore Consulting Services. Diane was stealing hours from her workers and billing them to a fake consulting account. Presumably, her own side business. Every hour she took from Elena, from Carmen, from James, was going directly into her personal accounts. Victoria pulled out her phone and began recording through the door gap. The evidence was displayed clearly on the screen. Systematic wage theft happening in real time. But then she saw something even more damaging. Diane opened the health insurance enrollment portal. She pulled up Elena's file and changed her employment classification from full-time eligible to temporary variable status. Despite Elena working consistent full-time hours for nearly 4 years. With a few keystrokes, Diane had just eliminated Elena's access to the health coverage her son desperately needed. Victoria felt a rage so intense it took every ounce of self-control not to burst through that door immediately. But she forced herself to keep recording, to document every click, every theft, every casual destruction of a family's well-being. At 11 a.m., Diane emerged from her office looking satisfied. Martinez, I need you to deep clean the conference facilities by yourself this afternoon. That is normally a 3-person assignment. Victoria looked at the massive ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and elaborate carpeting. All of it? Is that a problem? Because I have several applications from people who would appreciate the opportunity. No problem, Victoria said through clenched teeth. As she began the back-breaking work, scrubbing floors and polishing fixtures alone, Victoria understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about money for Diane. It was about power, the satisfaction of watching people struggle, of controlling their lives completely and squeezing harder just to watch them break. By 2 p.m., Victoria's back was aching and her hands were raw from chemicals. But she had gathered enough evidence to end Diane Whitmore's career permanently. Wage theft, benefit fraud, unsafe working conditions, systematic harassment. It was a comprehensive catalog of labor law violations. But as the afternoon progressed and she watched Elena struggle through an impossible workload, barely able to stand after 9 hours of brutal labor, Victoria realized something profound. This wasn't just about Diane Whitmore anymore. This was about a system that allowed predators like Diane to flourish, while good people like Elena suffered silently. And that system had been created and maintained by people like her. Executives who prioritized efficiency metrics over human dignity. Tomorrow it would all end. But first, she needed one final piece of evidence. The irrefutable proof that would make her case unshakable. Victoria's opportunity came at 3:30 p.m. As the day shift was ending, Diane had retreated to her office for what she called her daily administrative review, leaving Victoria and Elena to complete the final room preparations. But Victoria had noticed a pattern throughout the day. Every 45 minutes, Diane's office phone would ring with a distinctive pattern. 3 short rings, followed by silence. Each time, Diane would answer in hushed tones, speaking for approximately 4 to 5 minutes before disconnecting. As Elena gathered the housekeeping supplies for storage, Victoria made her decision. I am going to restock the cleaning closet near the administrative offices, she told Elena. Elena looked concerned. Mrs. Whitmore does not like staff near her office during her private time. I will be very quick. Victoria loaded her cart with supplies and pushed it toward the management corridor. The hallway was dimly lit, with Diane's office at the end. Through the frosted glass door, she could see Diane's silhouette bent over her desk. Then the phone rang. 3 short bursts. Then, silence. Victoria positioned herself in the supply closet adjacent to Diane's office. Close enough to hear clearly but hidden from view. She activated her phone's recording app. Whitmore speaking. Diane answered, her voice low but audible through the walls. Yes. I have the updated numbers for you. Rodriguez is down to 15 hours next week. Vasquez is at 18. That new front desk clerk? The one with the accent. I am putting him on night audit. He will quit within 2 weeks. Victoria's chest tightened. Diane was reporting to someone about her systematic harassment of employees. No complaints filed yet. They are too frightened to contact corporate. I have ensured that. Diane's laugh was cold. The brilliant part is that corporate sees our labor costs dropping and thinks I am an efficiency genius. The voice on the other end was muffled, but Victoria could distinguish a question about documentation. Of course, I am covering everything. Diane's voice was confident. I have fabricated performance reviews for all of them. Poor attitudes. Reliability concerns. You know, the standard justifications. If anyone ever investigates, I have a complete paper trail showing they deserved their treatment. Victoria heard papers rustling as Diane retrieved files. Here is the best part. I am billing all their eliminated hours to my consulting company account. The corporation pays the phantom wages to an account I control, and I simply transfer the difference to my personal accounts. I am making an additional $4,000 per month, and nobody questions it. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Diane detailing how she had been implementing this scheme at multiple Sterling properties. Not just Boston. Every word was being captured on Victoria's phone. A complete confession to federal wage theft, conspiracy, and fraud. But then Diane said something that made Victoria's entire body go rigid with fury. The Rodriguez woman is ideal for this. Single mother, Needs the insurance desperately. Will not speak up. Her son has asthma. Requires expensive medications. So she will accept whatever abuse I give her. I could reduce her to 0 hours and she would still come begging for shifts. The casual cruelty in Diane's voice. The way she discussed Elena's desperation as a tool for exploitation and entertainment pushed Victoria beyond her limits. Yes, I understand the type, Diane continued. These people are grateful for scraps. They believe they are fortunate to have any employment at all. It makes them exceptionally easy to manipulate. Victoria heard Diane's chair shift as she leaned back. Do not worry about exposure. Who would believe them? A collection of immigrants and uneducated workers against a general manager with outstanding performance records. Corporate would dismiss them immediately. The call ended with Diane scheduling another update for the following week. As Victoria heard the phone return to its cradle, she realized she had just recorded a complete confession. Not just to the crimes Diane was committing, but to her entire philosophy of exploitation and abuse. Victoria quickly backed away from the office, her heart pounding violently. She had everything she needed now. The recorded conversations, the computer screen footage of Diane manipulating timesheets, photographic evidence of hazardous working conditions. And now this. Diane's own words proving deliberate. Calculated abuse of vulnerable employees. As she rejoined Elena for the final tasks, Victoria noticed she was moving even more slowly than usual. Her face was drawn and she kept pressing her hand to her chest. Elena, are you all right? Just exhausted, she said. But Victoria could see it was more than ordinary fatigue. The stress, the physical demands, the constant fear. It was literally destroying her health. When did you last see a doctor? Elena laughed without humor. Doctors require money and insurance. My benefits were supposed to begin after 90 days. But Mrs. Whitmore changed my classification. So now I wait and hope nothing serious happens. Victoria watched her struggle to lift a laundry bag that weighed perhaps 20 pounds. This woman was working herself toward collapse for someone who viewed her suffering as profitable entertainment. At 4 p.m. Precisely. Diane emerged from her office with her designer handbag and a satisfied expression. Acceptable work today, Rodriguez. To ensure you arrive at 5 a.m. tomorrow for the early check-ins. Martinez. I may have additional assignments for you if you maintain this performance level. As Diane walked away, her expensive perfume lingering in the corridor, Victoria felt the weight of the evidence on her phone. Tomorrow morning, she would end Diane Whitmore's reign of terror. But today, she had to watch Elena limp slowly to her car, knowing she would return in 13 hours to face it all again. The smoking gun was loaded. Now it was time to fire it. Victoria did not sleep that night. She spent the hours in her apartment, organizing evidence and making secure phone calls. By 7 a.m., she had assembled a comprehensive file of Diane Whitmore's crimes, complete with recorded confessions, photographic documentation, and financial records. But she was not just preparing a case. She was preparing for transformation. At 1:45 p.m., Victoria returned to the Sterling Hotel as Veronica Martinez one final time. She found Elena in the staff locker room attempting to eat a granola bar despite obvious nausea. Are you certain you are well enough to work? Victoria asked, with genuine concern. I must work, Elena whispered. Diego's medication refill is due tomorrow. I cannot afford to lose any hours. Victoria felt her determination solidify. This ended today, at 2 p.m. sharp. Diane gathered the afternoon shift for a mandatory staff meeting. About 20 employees assembled in the service corridor, including Elena, Carmen, James, Miguel from maintenance, and several others. Victoria, recognized as victims of Diane's systematic exploitation. Listen carefully, everyone, Diane announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who enjoyed controlling others. Corporate is implementing new inventory accountability measures. She produced a thick folder of forms. From this point forward, any missing items will be deducted from the responsible employee's paycheck. Lost linens, damaged equipment, missing supplies. Everything comes directly from your wages. Victoria saw several employees exchange worried glances. This was blatantly illegal under Massachusetts labor law, and Diane absolutely knew it. I understand some of you might consider this unfair, Diane continued, her eyes finding Elena in the group. But perhaps if certain people paid more attention to their responsibilities instead of focusing on personal problems, these measures would not be necessary. The direct attack on Elena was the breaking point. Victoria stepped forward from the back of the group. Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, I believe there is something unfair here. But it is not what you think. Diane's eyes narrowed dangerously. Martinez, you have something to say? Yes, I do. Victoria reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew her phone. I have quite a substantial amount to say, actually. The first recording began to play, Diane's voice absolutely clear, boasting about reducing employees' hours and transferring the wages to her personal accounts. The effect was electric. Every employee in the corridor turned to stare at Diane, whose expression had transformed from smug authority to shocked panic in seconds. What the hell is this? Diane demanded, her voice rising. This is you yesterday at 3:30 p.m. explaining to your partner how you have been stealing wages and manipulating schedules systematically. Victoria's voice was calm, controlled, but every word struck like a physical blow. The recording continued. The Rodriguez woman is ideal for this. Single mother. Needs the insurance desperately. Will not speak up. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Around the corridor, other employees began to murmur, anger building in their voices and postures. You recorded me illegally, Diane shouted, but her bluster could not conceal the terror in her eyes. Actually, Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, perfectly legal for recording. Victoria stepped closer to Diane and for the first time allowed her real authority to show. But wage theft, benefit fraud, conspiracy to defraud employees, those are serious federal crimes. Diane's eyes darted around the circle of employees, all of whom were now looking at her with unconcealed fury and disgust. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Martinez, I will have you arrested for what exactly? Exposing the truth? Victoria reached into her other pocket and withdrew something that made Diane's face go completely ashen. A platinum identification badge. Victoria Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Hotels International. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria could hear the ambient hum of the heating system, the distant sound of elevator machinery, the collective sharp intake of breath from 20 employees who suddenly understood what they were witnessing. My name is not Veronica Martinez, Victoria said, her voice carrying down the corridor with undeniable authority. I am Victoria Sterling. I own this company. And you, Diane Whitmore, are finished. The explosion of reactions was immediate. Gasps of shock, whispered conversations. A few employees stepping backward in disbelief. But Victoria kept her focus locked on Diane, whose face had cycled through shock, fear, and was now settling into desperate fury. "You cannot do this," Diane screamed. "I have rights. I have an employment contract." "You had an employment contract?" Victoria corrected coldly. "But criminal fraud voids all agreements." Security. Two Sterling Hotel's corporate security officers who had been positioned discreetly since 9 a.m. entered through the service entrance and approached Diane. "Diane Whitmore, you are terminated immediately. You are also under federal investigation for wage theft, benefit fraud, and conspiracy to defraud employees. These officers will escort you from the property." As security moved toward Diane, she made one final desperate attempt. "You cannot prove anything. It is their word against mine." She gestured toward the employees. "Who will believe a group of immigrants over a respected general manager?" Victoria's voice cut like steel. "I have your recorded confession. I have computer logs documenting every fraudulent transaction. I have photographic evidence of every violation." She stepped closer to Diane, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "And I have something else. Diane, I have actual power, real authority. The kind you have been pretending to possess while abusing people who could not fight back." Diane's shoulders collapsed as the security officers reached her position. "This is not over," she muttered. "Yes, it absolutely is." Victoria turned to address the assembled employees. "And for all of you, everything is just beginning." As Diane was escorted from the hotel, past guests who stopped to observe, past the front desk she had ruled through intimidation, past the office where she had orchestrated months of systematic cruelty, Victoria felt a satisfaction deeper than any business success she had ever achieved. But the real work was only starting. The silence after Diane's removal was profound. 20 employees stood in a circle, staring at their actual CEO, attempting to process what had just occurred. Victoria could see confusion, relief, fear, and exhaustion battling across their faces. Elena was the first to speak, her voice barely audible. You are truly the owner." "I am, and I owe every one of you an apology." Victoria looked each employee directly in the eyes. "I built this company on the foundation that exceptional hospitality begins with exceptional treatment of staff. But I failed you. I became so focused on financial reports that I lost sight of what was happening in these corridors." Carmen stepped forward, still clutching her laundry assignment sheet. "So, what happens now? Will we all be terminated for speaking with you?" The question struck Victoria like a blow. These people were so conditioned to expect retaliation that even their liberation appeared threatening. "Nobody will be terminated. In fact, we are going to repair everything Diane destroyed." Starting immediately, Victoria pulled out her phone. "I am calling our corporate human resources director. Every illegal hour eliminated. Every stolen wage. Every denied benefit. We are going to make everything right." Within 30 minutes, Patricia Morrison, Sterling Hotel's Chief Human Resources Officer, arrived with a team of 4 specialists and multiple laptops. Victoria had worked with Patricia for 12 years, and she was one of the few executives Victoria trusted without reservation. "Patricia, I need you to conduct emergency comprehensive audits on every employee file Diane Whitmore touched in the past 18 months. Full wage restoration. Immediate benefit enrollment for anyone who was illegally denied coverage, and retroactive adjustments." Patricia's team established a temporary processing center in the staff conference room. "Elena Rodriguez," Patricia called out, consulting her tablet. You have been employed here almost 4 years, correct? Elena nodded nervously, still not quite believing this was reality. According to Diane's records, you are classified as temporary part-time with no benefits. But your actual hours worked demonstrate you have been full-time for 46 consecutive months. Patricia's fingers moved rapidly across her tablet, effective immediately. You are classified as permanent, full-time, with complete health coverage, retroactive to your original employment date. Elena's knees buckled. Victoria steadied her arm as tears streamed down her face. My son's medications, she whispered, fully covered. Patricia's voice was warm but professional. Pre-authorization for all treatments will be processed today. And Elena, you are owed $18,362 in stolen wages and unpaid overtime. That payment will be issued within 72 hours. The sound that came from Elena's throat was equal parts sob, laugh, and prayer of gratitude. Around the room, other employees were having similar revelations as Patricia's team worked systematically through the files. But Victoria was not finished. Everyone, I need your complete attention. She stood in the center of the conference room, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built a hospitality empire from nothing. What happened here can never be allowed to happen again. So we are fundamentally changing how this company operates. She gestured to Carmen, who had been concealing a serious health issue out of fear. Carmen, you mentioned chronic back pain from the industrial equipment. Effective immediately. You are on paid medical leave until your physician clears you for return. Full salary. Full benefits. Guaranteed position upon recovery. Carmen's hand went to her lower back, her eyes filling with disbelief. Victoria continued. James, you expressed interest in moving into management training. How would you feel about assistant front desk manager? James's clipboard fell to the floor with a clatter. Ma'am, I do not have formal hospitality education or you have something better. You understand what it means to work every position in this hotel with dignity. You care genuinely about the people who work here and the guests we serve. That is what I need in leadership. But the most significant change was yet to come. Elena, Victoria said, turning to face the woman who had unknowingly catalyzed this entire transformation. I have a proposal for you. She looked up with eyes still swollen from crying, still struggling to comprehend that her son would receive his treatments. I am offering you the housekeeping director position. The silence was complete. Even Patricia's team stopped working. Ma'am, Elena stammered, I only clean rooms. I do not know how to manage departments or... You understand hard work better than anyone should have to. You understand how to maintain dignity under impossible circumstances. You know every detail of housekeeping operations and every challenge these employees face. Victoria's voice grew stronger. Elena, you have been managing your own impossible situation for 4 years, while maintaining exceptional standards. Managing a department will be straightforward by comparison. But I have no management experience or credentials. I will provide comprehensive training, full management development program, hospitality administration courses, whatever you need. Starting salary is $72,000, plus full executive benefits with performance bonuses tied to employee well-being. Not just cost reduction. Elena stared at her as if she were speaking an incomprehensible language. $72,000? That is the starting salary. Outstanding directors who genuinely care for their teams get promoted to regional positions. Those positions pay over $150,000 annually. Around the room, Victoria could see the transformation beginning. 20 people who had arrived expecting another day of abuse were watching their entire lives change in real time. But the most crucial change was still to be announced. One more critical thing. Victoria declared, "We are establishing employee advocacy councils at every Sterling Hotel's property. Representatives elected by staff with direct, secure access to corporate leadership. No retaliation. No intimidation. No fear. If anything like this ever begins happening again, you will have immediate access to stop it." She pulled out a business card and handed it to Elena. "This has my direct personal cell phone number. If anyone, any manager, any director, even another executive, ever treats you or your team the way Diane did, you call me immediately, day or night." Miguel raised his hand tentatively. "What happens to Mrs. Whitmore? Does she simply walk away?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Diane's case has been forwarded to federal investigators. Wage theft is a felony offense. She will face criminal prosecution. And we will be pursuing aggressive civil litigation to recover every dollar she stole. Not just from the company, but from each of you personally." Patricia looked up from her laptop. "Victoria, we have identified similar patterns at 6 other properties. Same methodology. Different managers. All trained by Diane. Same response." Victoria's voice carried absolute commitment. "Full investigations at every location. Complete restitution for all affected employees. And everyone involved will be prosecuted to the maximum extent of federal law. We are not just repairing this hotel. We are transforming the entire organization." As the afternoon progressed, Victoria observed 20 demoralized employees transform into something she had never witnessed before. A genuine community. People who had been isolated through fear were now communicating openly, sharing experiences, discovering they were not alone in their suffering. Elena stood in the center of it all, still wearing her housekeeping uniform, but now carrying herself completely differently. The woman who had been weeping in a corridor that morning was gone, replaced by someone beginning to recognize her own capabilities and worth. "Thank you," she said to Victoria, her voice steady for the first time since they had met. "Not just for the position or the money, for seeing us as human beings." Victoria felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. "Thank you for reminding me what true leadership requires." As the sun set over Boston Harbor, the Sterling Hotel looked identical from the outside. But inside, everything had fundamentally changed. And tomorrow, the real transformation would begin. 4 weeks after that transformative day, Victoria returned to the Boston Sterling for what she had privately begun calling her reality verification visits. But the environment that greeted her was almost unrecognizable from the property she had infiltrated just a month before. The first thing she noticed was the atmosphere. Laughter emanating from the staff break room. Genuine laughter. Not the nervous kind people produce when they fear their supervisor might be monitoring them. In the break room, she found James training 3 new front desk associates on the reservation system. His natural leadership abilities finally given space to develop. On the wall behind him hung a framed certificate. Assistant Manager of the Quarter. Staff Choice Award. The key is accuracy and guest care, not transaction speed. James was explaining to the trainees. "We would rather you take appropriate time and create exceptional experiences than rush through check-ins mechanically. Nobody will criticize you for being thorough and attentive." Victoria smiled at the indirect reference to the previous regime. Under Diane, employees had been terrorized into rushing through every interaction, leading to mistakes that became justification for further punishment. Near the concierge desk, Carmen was assisting a guest with theater recommendations. her chronic back condition now properly treated. She moved with confidence and comfort. The comprehensive healthcare policy Victoria had implemented had already been adopted by 4 major hospitality competitors. A ripple effect she had not anticipated but deeply valued. But it was Elena who represented the most dramatic transformation. Victoria found her in the housekeeping offices, focused intently on a laptop, reviewing staff schedules with the concentrated attention of someone mastering new responsibilities. She had exchanged her housekeeping uniform for professional business attire, and her nameplate now read Elena Rodriguez, Director of Housekeeping Services. But more significantly, she carried herself with an authority that came from genuine competence, not fear. "How are the management training courses progressing?" Victoria asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Challenging," Elena admitted, saving her work and looking up with a genuine smile. "I never imagined I would be learning about departmental budgets and staff development strategies. But it makes so much sense when you have actually worked every position in the operation." She gestured to a chart on her wall, displaying employee satisfaction metrics. The numbers had skyrocketed from Diane's dismal ratings to industry-leading levels in just 4 weeks. "The team is incredible," Elena continued. "Once people stopped being afraid, they started contributing ideas. James suggested cross-training programs so nobody feels trapped in one role. Carmen designed a new guest feedback system that actually considers staff perspective. Even the part-time college students are proposing innovations." Victoria looked through the office window at the hotel lobby where she could observe the tangible results of Elena's leadership. Employees moved with purpose rather than fear. Guests were visibly pleased as they interacted with staff who seemed genuinely happy to provide service. "How is Diego?" Victoria asked. Elena's entire face illuminated. "He had his treatments. The pulmonologist says his lung function has improved dramatically. He can participate in sports now, play with other children normally." Her voice caught slightly. "He wants to meet you. He calls you the angel lady who saved his mama. I would be honored." "There is something else," Elena said, retrieving a folder. "Remember when you asked me to document any other situation similar to what happened with Diane?" Victoria leaned forward, her attention sharpening immediately. "I have been networking with directors at other hotel chains. Not officially. Just professional conversations at industry conferences." "Victoria, what Diane was doing is not uncommon at all. The wage manipulation, the benefit fraud, the psychological abuse. It is almost as if there is an unwritten playbook being shared throughout the industry." She opened the folder to reveal a compilation of testimonies from hospitality workers across multiple chains. "I believe Sterling Hotels could lead comprehensive industry reform, not just correcting our own problems, but establishing standards that force the entire hospitality sector to follow." Victoria felt that familiar electricity of a transformative idea taking form. "What are you proposing?" "A certification program. Worker-verified ethical hospitality, or something similar. Properties that meet rigorous standards receive the certification. Travelers can choose to stay at hotels that demonstrate genuine commitment to employee welfare, and the verification comes from the workers themselves, not corporate public relations." "Precisely." Elena's eyes were bright with passionate conviction. "Anonymous comprehensive surveys, unannounced inspections, real accountability with consequences. We have credibility now. Everyone knows Sterling Hotels was willing to investigate and repair its own systemic problems publicly. Other companies would have to participate or appear terrible by comparison." Victoria sat back, genuinely impressed by the strategic thinking. 6 months ago, Elena had been too afraid to request consistent scheduling. Now she was designing industry-wide reform initiatives. Develop a complete proposal, Victoria said. Full business plan, implementation framework, budget requirements, potential partnerships. I want to review it within 3 weeks. Elena nodded, already making detailed notes. As Victoria prepared to leave, she took one final walk through the hotel. Near the front desk, she noticed the staff bulletin board where Diane's chaotic scheduling had once terrorized employees. Now it displayed clean, predictable schedules where every employee knew their shifts weeks in advance, alongside photographs from the hotel's first employee appreciation event at a harbor cruise. At the concierge station, a familiar object caught her attention. The same embroidered name tag that had been crumpled on the corridor floor a month ago. But now it read Elena Rodriguez, Director of Housekeeping Services, and it was attached to a professional blazer instead of a housekeeping uniform. As she headed toward the exit, James called out from the front desk, "Ms. Sterling, before you leave, we wanted to give you something." James produced a framed photograph. The entire hotel staff gathered in the renovated employee lounge, which had been redesigned with comfortable seating, a proper kitchen facility, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. In the center of the group, Elena held a small plaque that read Sterling Hotel Boston. Employee Choice. Best Hospitality Employer 2024. It is not an official industry award, James explained with a smile. We created it ourselves, but we figured if anyone should determine whether a workplace is ethical, it should be the people who actually work there every day. Victoria accepted the photograph, feeling unexpected emotion. In all her years of business achievement, no recognition had meant more than this. "Thank you," she said simply. "All of you." As she walked to her car, Victoria reflected on how profoundly the past month had transformed not just this property, but her entire understanding of leadership and responsibility. She had begun this investigation believing she was rescuing her employees from an abusive manager. Instead, they had rescued her from becoming the kind of leader who loses connection with why businesses exist in the first place. To serve people. All people. Not just profit margins. Tomorrow, she would begin implementing the Employee Advocacy Council system throughout the entire Sterling Hotels network. Next month, Elena's industry certification program would receive full corporate resources and support. But tonight, she would rest, knowing that 20 people were sleeping without fear because someone had finally listened when they needed help desperately. 7 months after that transformative night shift, Victoria stood before a capacity audience at the International Hospitality Leadership Conference. The subject of her keynote address? Leadership from the ground level. What happens when executives stop hiding in corner offices? But first, she had a story to share. Last year, I believed I was leading a successful hospitality company. Victoria began, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Our revenues were exceptional. Our efficiency metrics were outstanding. And our management evaluations were exemplary. By every measurement that mattered to investors, Sterling Hotels was performing brilliantly. She advanced to the next slide, displaying a photograph of Elena in her housekeeping uniform, captured from security footage on that first morning. But I was not leading a successful company. I was presiding over a system that enabled good people to suffer while predators profited from their desperation. And the most damning part, I had absolutely no awareness it was happening under my own leadership. The auditorium remained completely silent as Victoria guided the audience through her undercover experience. The wage theft, the benefit fraud, the systematic psychological manipulation that had been occurring under the Sterling Hotels brand. The fundamental truth is that authentic leadership is not about commanding from executive suites. It is about understanding from service corridors. It is about recognizing that the people closest to operations are usually closest to solutions. She advanced again. The new slide displayed Elena at her desk in professional attire, reviewing departmental reports with her management team. Today, Elena Rodriguez directs housekeeping operations at one of our highest-performing properties. Employee satisfaction exceeds 96%. Guest ratings have increased 52%. And profitability has grown 27%. Because when you genuinely value people, exceptional results follow naturally. Victoria gestured toward the audience where Elena sat in the front row, representing Sterling Hotels at her first international industry conference. But this story is not really about Sterling Hotels specifically. It is about every hospitality company. Every leader, every person who possesses the power to make someone else's day better or worse through their decisions. The presentation continued with concrete outcomes. The worker-verified ethical hospitality certification that 17 major hotel chains had already adopted. The industry-wide wage theft investigations that had recovered $3.8 million for workers across multiple companies. The state and federal legislation strengthening hospitality labor protections that had been inspired by their public transparency. We have demonstrated that ethical treatment of employees is not just morally imperative, it is financially advantageous. Companies with worker-verified certification are experiencing average profit increases of 21% and customer loyalty improvements of 38%. Ethical business is profitable business. As Victoria concluded her presentation, she returned to the personal narrative that had initiated everything. 7 months ago, I heard someone crying in a service corridor and chose to investigate. That moment of basic human curiosity transformed everything. Not just for Elena, not just for Sterling Hotels, but for thousands of hospitality workers throughout the industry. She paused, looking directly into the cameras, broadcasting this keynote internationally. So here is my challenge to every leader watching this presentation. When did you last genuinely listen to the people who work for you, not in a scripted corporate meeting or a sanitized employee survey, but truly listened with openness and humility? When did you last experience your workplace through the perspective of someone who cannot afford to lose their position? Victoria stepped closer to the stage edge. Authentic leadership means elevating others, especially when nobody is observing your actions. It means using your authority to protect people, not exploit their vulnerability for efficiency metrics. And it means possessing the courage to acknowledge when your systems are fundamentally broken and the determination to repair them completely. The final slide appeared, displaying a photograph of the Sterling Hotels Employee Advocacy Council meeting, with representatives from all 63 properties gathered as equals around a conference table. The person crying in that corridor could be in your organization right now. The question is, will you hear them? And more critically, will you act decisively? As applause filled the auditorium, Victoria felt the same satisfaction she had experienced that day when Diane Whitmore was escorted from the hotel. But deeper than satisfaction was something more profound: purpose and responsibility. After the presentation, as Victoria signed copies of the business school case study that MIT had published about the Sterling Hotel's transformation, a young hotel general manager approached her nervously. "Ms. Sterling, I believe we might have similar issues at our property that mirror what you discovered. Where should I begin?" Victoria handed her Elena's business card. "Begin by listening authentically, truly listening without defensive reactions. And when you hear something disturbing, do not rationalize it away with efficiency arguments. Fix it immediately and transparently. Later that evening, Victoria Video called the Boston Sterling to connect with Elena, a practice that had become part of her weekly routine. "How is Diego?" she asked. "Thriving. His doctor says his lung function is better than average for his age group now. He has been asking when he can visit the hotel again. He wants to see Mama's big office with the view. Bring him anytime. I would be delighted to meet the little boy who helped transform our entire company." "Victoria." Elena's voice became serious. "I received a call today from a housekeeping supervisor at Meridian Hotels. She had seen the conference coverage and wanted to know if our Employee Advocacy Council model could be implemented at other hospitality companies." "What did you tell her?" "I told her to document everything systematically. Identify trusted colleagues among her coworkers, and that we would assist her in building a case if she needed support." "Was that appropriate?" Victoria smiled warmly. "That was perfect. You are thinking like a genuine industry leader now." After ending the call, Victoria stood at her office window overlooking the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in that vast city, in hotels and restaurants and service businesses, there were probably other Elenas. Good people trapped in exploitative situations, waiting desperately for someone with authority to notice their suffering and care enough to act. But now there were also other Victoria Sterlings, leaders who had heard this story and decided to examine their own organizations more critically, their own responsibilities more honestly. Transformation was spreading one workplace at a time, one courageous decision at a time. And it had all begun with someone brave enough to knock on a corridor door and ask one simple human question: "Is everything all right?" The truth had been more devastating than anyone imagined, but the solution had been more straightforward than anyone expected. Treat people with genuine dignity and humanity, and exceptional results follow naturally. If you have ever witnessed injustice in your workplace, or if you are in a position to create meaningful change, share this story, because the person crying in the corridor might be closer than you realize, and they are counting on someone exactly like you to care enough to act decisively.